Two wasn't supposed to hear it. But sometimes, being old means you learn how to disappear in plain sight. I had just stepped into the hallway, my feet aching from too many years of standing and serving others. I'd meant to bring Evan his childhood watch his father's, realized so he could wear it on his wedding day. But the words stopped me cold, even before I turned the corner. "I don't want your mom at the wedding," Claire said. Calm, sharp, a quiet dagger cloaked in lace and smiles. There was a pause. Not long, but enough for me to feel the ground shift. Evan's voice in me sunswaz lower, almost unsure. "She's my mother, Claire. She's old. She'll embarrass us. I want our day to be perfect, and that includes not having her limp around like some sad little ghost." Sad little ghost. I stood frozen in the hallway, the box in my hand suddenly so heavy it might have been filled with bricks instead of memory. I backed away before I could hear his response. Maybe because I already knew it. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. And that same day, everything else unraveled. For most of my life, I was the dependable one. Quiet, careful, invisible. When my husband, Thomas, died 10 years ago, I didn't cry in front of anyone. I wore black for the funeral, cooked for the guests, and cleaned up after. That's what we did in our generation. We bore grief in silence, wore strength like armor, and let the world keep moving while we fell apart privately. Evan had always been kind, gentle even. As a boy, he used to rub my feet after long shifts at the diner, trace the calluses on my hands like they were stories etched in skin. He once told me I was the strongest person he knew. That version of Evan vanished the moment he met Claire. She was beautiful, yes, polished, all charm and ambition. The type who drank iced oat milk lattes and said things like generational wealth without irony. Evan, freshly promoted at the architecture firm, was dazzled. Who wouldn't be? Claire came into our lives like a tidal wave, smiling, hugging, decorating. She brought over soy candles for my birthday and never forgot to say thank you. But underneath all that was something cold. It was in the way she winced every time I brought up Evan's father. In the way she accidentally left me off group texts about bridal showers and rehearsals. I felt it. I just didn't want to admit it. But now I had heard it, clear as a church bell on a winter morning. I wasn't wanted. I drove home that afternoon with the watch still in its velvet box. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I sat on the porch swing Thomas built 30 years ago and watched the wind bend the dying roses along the fence. I thought about not going to the wedding. I thought about not telling Evan I heard. And then I thought about how many times I had swallowed my pride just to keep peace. How many birthdays I'd spent alone because they had plans. How often I'd smiled through feeling unwanted. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I got up and made tea, standing in my kitchen, lit only by the soft orange glow of the stove light. I picked up my phone. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I needed to know that the hurt I felt was justified. So I scrolled. I opened Evan's Facebook and tapped on Claire's profile. Nothing stood out. Beautiful photos. Long captions about gratitude and manifesting love. I clicked through some tagged posts. Then, I saw a name I didn't recognize. Leo Whitaker. A photographer. Handsome. Too handsome, I thought. They were tagged in an old engagement shoot post. One where Claire had written, "Thank you, Leo, for capturing our most intimate moments with such magic." I clicked his page. Public. The first thing I saw was a photo. Claire. Not with Evan. On a rooftop, wine in hand. Close. Too close. Her hand on Leo's knee. A comment under the photo read, "Same time next week? I'll bring the red." It could have been innocent. Except, scrolling further, I found more. A story post saved to highlights. Them laughing. Her in a silk robe. Him shirtless in the background. The caption, "Late checkout? Worth it." My stomach turned. The timestamps matched. 2 weeks before her bachelorette party. And just like that, everything inside me flipped. They had excluded me to maintain an illusion. A perfect wedding. A spotless family. But I wasn't the one staining it. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Ironed my blouse. Brushed my hair. Put on the pearl earrings Thomas gave me on our 15th anniversary. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel angry. I felt awake. I called Evan. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay?" he asked, his voice light. "No," I said. "We need to talk. Today." He hesitated. "I'm kinda." "Today, Evan." There was silence. Then, "All right. Come by the apartment." When I got there, Claire wasn't home. Evan greeted me with a distracted hug, one eye on his phone. I sat on the edge of his sleek, modern couch. You said I was invited to the wedding. You are, he said. It's just, Claire's under stress. You know how she gets. She said she doesn't want me there. I said. I heard it. His face paled. I was in the hallway. Yesterday. I came to give you your father's watch. He sat down slowly. Mom, I didn't mean. She said I'd embarrass her. That I was a sad little ghost. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed screenshots. Photos of Claire and Leo. Captions. Comments. I handed them to him in silence. He took them with shaking hands. As he flipped through, the color drained from his face. How long have you known? He whispered. I found it last night. He looked at me like I had just set fire to his house. Like I was the one who had ruined everything. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't know. I know you didn't. He sat back, stunned. The papers loose in his lap. The phone on the table buzzed. Claire, probably. I stood. You have a choice to make, Evan. But just so we're clear, I won't be your shame. He looked up, eyes red. You're not. I didn't go to the wedding. Because there was no wedding. But that part of the story comes later. Let me take you back because what came next changed everything. Evan didn't call me for 2 days. I thought he might come over. Or at least send a message. Something. But silence has a sound of its own, especially when it rings in the ears of someone who's spent her life listening for things left unsaid. On the third morning, just as the sun cut through the lace curtains of my kitchen window, the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting a parcel. It was Claire, standing there in workout leggings, sunglasses pushed to the top of her head, and her phone still in hand like she hadn't even paused her day to walk over and ruin mine. Hi, Margaret, she said brightly, too brightly. Can we talk? I looked at her for a long beat, then stepped aside. She walked into my house like she owned the oxygen in it. I assume Evan showed you those photos, she said, slipping off her shades. Her tone was bored, not ashamed, not defensive. Yes, I said simply. Well, I can explain, she began, like I'd caught her in a parking ticket. I crossed my arms. You had an affair. She smiled, a little tilt of the mouth, no warmth in it. Look, it was one time. A mistake. We were going through a hard patch. Evan and I weren't even officially engaged when that happened. We were on a break. My breath caught. That old sitcom excuse. And the messages? The hotel stories? The dinner dates? Her jaw tightened, just for a flicker. Those were old. Evan knows now. We talked. He forgives me. And we're moving on. I stared at her. So calm. So practiced. I know you don't like me, Margaret. And that's fine, she continued. But Evan loves me. And you need to be okay with that. We're still getting married. But we both agree it would be best if you weren't there. I said nothing. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was doing me a favor. We'll send you pictures. And maybe after the honeymoon, we can grab brunch and, reconnect. I nodded slowly, mostly so I wouldn't scream. Then I smiled. You're right. She blinked. I am. Yes. About one thing. Evan does love you. But he doesn't know who you are yet. Her eyes narrowed. I think you should be careful, Margaret. And I think you should sit down, I said, gesturing to the table. What? I made lemon cake. Your favorite, right? She looked thrown for a moment. But something in her ego must have convinced her I was surrendering, because she sat. I walked into the kitchen, pulled out the cake I'd baked the night before, light, fluffy, with a lemon glaze, and brought it to the table. Sliced a piece for her. She took it. Then I sat across from her and placed my phone on the table between us. What's that? Just a voice memo, I said. I find it helps to keep records these days. Memory's not what it used to be. She stiffened. Are you recording me? I was. Not anymore. Her eyes flared. That's illegal. No, dear. It's legal in this state as long as one person in the conversation consents. That person was me. She pushed back from the table. What do you want? To give you a choice, I said. You leave Evan. Clean. Quiet. No drama. You say it was mutual. You keep your reputation, your career, your dignity. Or, I send this recording to Evan's firm, your parents, and maybe even Leo's girlfriend. Does he still have one? Claire stood, pale now, all that smugness melting like sugar on heat. You wouldn't. I shrugged. I'm just a sad little ghost, remember? What do I have to lose? For once, Claire had no answer. She stormed out of my house like the devil himself had whispered in her ear. I sat back at the table, the cake untouched on her plate, and allowed myself the first smile in days. That evening, Evan came over. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was loose, his hair a mess, and his eyes, those same eyes that once held so much wonder, looked clouded. "Claire told me she came by," he said, standing awkwardly near the door. I nodded. "She did. She said, you threatened her." I raised my eyebrows. "Did she mention the part where she wanted to exclude me from the wedding?" He sighed. "Mom, this whole thing has gotten out of hand." "Yes," I agreed. "It has. I don't know what to do." "You don't have to decide today, Evan. Just tell me this: if your father were here, what would you tell him?" That silenced him. He looked around the room like Thomas might still be there, hidden behind a curtain, waiting to step in with advice. "I'd tell him I made a mistake," Evan whispered. "That I didn't want to lose her, so I ignored everything, including you." I walked to the shelf and pulled out the velvet box, held it in both hands before offering it to him. He took it. "I wanted to give you this before the wedding," I said. "It was his. He wore it the day we got married, and the day you were born." Evan opened the box, his fingers trembling as he stared at the worn gold watch. "I don't think there's going to be a wedding," he said finally. I nodded. "Not in joy, not in triumph. Just quiet understanding. Because even when you win, grief walks in behind you." The days that followed were slow and strange. Claire made no public statements. Her Instagram went quiet. Evan moved back into his old apartment. I brought him lasagna. We didn't talk about her. But one morning, I came outside to find a car parked across the street. Inside it, Claire. She didn't come to the door. Just sat there for a long while, staring at my porch. I watched from behind the curtain, heart thudding. Eventually, she drove away. I hoped that was the last time I'd see her. But I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I was in the grocery store aisle 6, picking out potatoes when I felt a hand on my arm. I turned. It was Claire's mother, a tall, dignified woman with silver hair and a designer coat. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice low. "But I wanted to say thank you." I blinked. "I'm sorry." She told me everything. Eventually. About Leo. The wedding. You. "I didn't do it for thanks," I said. "I know. That's why it matters." She paused, her eyes softening. I raised Claire to be strong, ambitious, but I forgot to teach her humility and grace. You reminded her fully what it means to be accountable. I just wanted my son to see the truth. And he did. Because of you. She offered her hand. I shook it. As she walked away, I wondered how many mothers had stood where I stood, forced to clean up the wreckage of their children's poor choices, holding grace in one hand and justice in the other. Weeks turned into months. Evan threw himself into work. He and I started having Sunday dinners again. He even smiled sometimes. One night, after a long walk through the neighborhood, he asked, "Do you ever regret it? How you handled it?" I stopped walking, looked up at the stars just starting to prick the sky. "No," I said, "because silence would have been the easier choice. But I didn't raise you to be a man who loves easy lies." He nodded. "I'm proud of you, Mom." It was the first time I'd heard him say that in years. And it meant more than any wedding ever could. Spring drifted into summer, and the pain began to lose its edges. Evan came over every weekend now, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with a tool in hand to fix the faucet, change a light bulb, trim the hedge his father once kept immaculate. I didn't need him to, but I let him. He needed it more than I did. One Sunday in June, he arrived with a pie in a brown box and a quiet look on his face. "Can we sit?" he asked, without waiting for an answer. I poured us both some iced tea, and we sat on the porch where Thomas used to read the newspaper every morning. "I've been thinking about Dad," he said. I smiled. "So have I. I remember when he got sick," Evan continued, his voice slow and thoughtful. "You didn't tell me how bad it was until the very end. I always wondered why. I wanted to protect you." He nodded. "And now I understand. Because I tried to protect Claire from the truth. From the consequences." A long silence stretched between us, comfortable but heavy. "I saw her again," he said. My hand paused on my glass. "She came by the office. Said she wanted closure. Said she was in therapy. That she missed me." I looked at him carefully. "And what did you say?" "That I didn't miss her. That I missed who I thought she was." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "I've made peace with it," he said. "But I still feel stupid sometimes. Like I should have seen it coming." "You're not stupid," Evan, I said gently. You just loved someone who didn't know how to love you back. He looked at me for a long time. Is that what you think happened between you and Dad? In the beginning? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought of those early years in a long time. Yes, I said softly. But your father grew into love. He learned how to show it. Not with words, but with time. With consistency. Evan nodded. I want that, he said. The kind of love that doesn't need performance. Just presence. You will find it, I told him. Because you've learned the hard way what it isn't. That summer, I started volunteering at the local community center. It was Evan's idea, really. You've got too much wisdom to keep it locked in this house, he joked. Besides, the world needs more people like you. So I started helping in the reading room, mostly children in the morning and seniors in the afternoon. The kids were sweet, loud, and chaotic. The seniors were quieter, but their stories burned with the slow, steady fire of decades. That's how I met Elsie. She was 92, wore bright lipstick and leopard print scarves, and told everyone she once danced with Frank Sinatra. I don't know if it was true, but it didn't matter. She believed it, and that made it real enough for me. One afternoon, she looked at me over her half-moon glasses and said, "You're carrying something heavy, sweetheart. I can see it in your spine." I laughed. Just age. No, darling. That's guilt. I blinked. She tapped her cane once. You did something brave, didn't you? Something that cost you. I hesitated. Then I nodded. She smiled. That kind of bravery will haunt you if you don't forgive yourself for surviving it. Her words stayed with me for days. Because even after all that happened, after the lies, the betrayal, the broken engagement, there was a small part of me that still felt wrong. As if I had blown up my son's life. As if maybe, somehow, I could have done it differently. But Elsie was right. Bravery has a cost. And it demands that you carry your own peace, because no one else will hand it to you. By late August, Evan had begun to date again. Nothing serious. A coffee here, a dinner there. He told me about a woman named Justine, smart, kind, works in publishing, but he was careful not to overstate it. I could see the caution in his eyes. He was wounded, still healing, but healing nonetheless. One day he brought her by. "Justine, this is my mom, Margaret." She offered her hand, warm and confident. "I've heard a lot about you." I smiled. "All lies, I'm sure." She laughed. "Only the flattering ones." She stayed for tea, and by the end of the hour, I saw it. The softness in her gaze, the way she watched Evan speak, as though listening was an act of love. I liked her, but more importantly, I saw that she respected my son. After she left, Evan lingered at the door. "You approve?" he asked. "I do. She's not Claire." "I know," I said. "And neither are you." Fall came, crisp and golden. And with it, the community center asked if I'd be willing to speak at their senior storytelling event. I laughed at first. I'm not interesting enough. But the coordinator insisted. Everyone's story matters. So I stood on a little stage, in front of 50 folding chairs, and told them mine. I didn't name Claire. I didn't shame Evan. I just spoke the truth. About loyalty. About being invisible. About finding strength in age, not weakness. Afterward, a young woman approached me, maybe 30 years old. She was crying. "My fiancé's mom died last year," she said. "And I never told her how much I admired her. Your story reminded me." She hugged me. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't an embarrassment. I was a woman who lived, who hurt, who fought for what mattered. And I wasn't done yet. The holidays came, and for the first time in years, the house was full again. Evan brought Justine. They helped me cook. We laughed, we burned the stuffing, we danced in socks across the kitchen floor. There was no wedding album on the table, but there was warmth. There was life. On New Year's Eve, just before midnight, Evan stood next to me on the porch again. "I never asked," he said. "How did you know?" "About Claire." I listened. "To what?" "To what wasn't said." He nodded. "Do you think she ever loved me?" he asked. Not with bitterness but curiosity, like a child still trying to understand why the stars burn. "I think she loved what you gave her, but not who you were." "That's fair." Then he asked me something I didn't expect. "Have you ever thought about dating again?" I blinked. "At 71? Why not? I'm not sure anyone's looking for a woman with silver roots and a bad hip." He smiled. "Then they don't deserve you." I didn't answer him that night. But 2 weeks later, I signed up for the senior swim class at the YMCA. And there, I met someone. A man named James. Widower. Former high school history teacher. Soft-spoken. Handsome in that comfortable shoes and flannel shirt kind of way. He asked me to coffee. I said yes. Because maybe stories don't end when you expect them to. Maybe they bend and break and twist, but they keep going. And sometimes, the best chapters are the ones you didn't plan for. James and I didn't fall in love overnight. It started with gentle conversation over burnt coffee and lemon scones too dry for polite society. We talked about books, about losing people, about what it meant to outlive the things you once thought would never leave you. He didn't ask invasive questions. He didn't prod at old wounds. He just sat across from me, steady and present, as though time wasn't rushing us toward anything at all. One evening after class, as we dried our hair in the locker hallway, he turned to me and said, "You carry yourself like a woman who spent a long time being told she was too much and not enough at the same time." The words struck something in me, not because they hurt, but because they freed me. "How did you know?" I asked. He smiled. "Because I've been told the same." We started walking in the park every Wednesday. He'd bring seed for the ducks. I'd bring ginger chews for our knees. We didn't talk about the future. We just existed in the now, in the breath, in the softness that comes when you realize love isn't a storm, it's shelter. One afternoon, Evan noticed the second teacup on the table and raised an eyebrow. "Someone been over?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I just wiped my hands on the dish towel and said, "His name is James." Evan grinned. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I didn't owe anyone an apology for being alive in the fullest sense. By February, the neighborhood started whispering. "Margaret's seeing someone. I heard Mrs. Connors tell her dog." I didn't mind. Let them whisper. After all, when you've been invisible most of your life, being seen even through gossipy's a kind of rebirth. James came to Sunday dinner. Evan grilled him over mashed potatoes and green beans. Justine, God bless her, kept trying to steer the conversation back to books and art. James answered every question with grace and good humor. After dinner, while Evan and Justine cleared the table, James helped me dry the dishes. I watched his hands move steady, worn, gentle. The same hands that once held history textbooks and comforted grandchildren. "I like your boy," he said softly. "He's had to grow up a lot," I replied. James nodded. "So have I." One morning in early March, Claire called me. I stared at her name blinking on the screen for a long moment before picking up. "Hello." "Margaret, I won't take up much of your time." Her voice was different. No sugar. No sharp edges. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." I said nothing. "I know I can't undo anything. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I've been going to therapy, working through things. And I realized I was cruel. To you. To Evan. To myself, too." I waited. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was human. Finally. "I was scared of being small," she said. "And so I tried to make everyone else smaller." I exhaled. That's a painful truth to live with. "I know. I'm trying to be better." A long pause. Then, "You don't owe me anything. But thank you. For protecting Evan. Even from me." And just like that, she hung up. I sat in the kitchen, phone on the counter, unsure whether to feel sorrow or relief. Maybe both. Because even villains carry broken hearts. And even the people who hurt us are capable of change. That spring, Justine and Evan adopted a dog from the shelter. A mutt with floppy ears and a grumpy old man face. They named him Harold. They brought him over one Sunday, and he promptly peed on my rug. I didn't even mind. He curled up next to me on the couch afterward, snoring softly while I read aloud from a novel Justine lent me. It was the most peace I'd known in years. In late April, Evan took me to the cemetery. We hadn't been in a while. We brought fresh tulips and the watch. He wanted to leave it at Thomas's grave. "I don't need it to remember him," he said. "And he should have it." We stood in silence for a long while. Then Evan turned to me. "You know, when Claire said those words about you being a sad little ghost, I didn't say anything. I should have. That's my biggest regret." I reached for his hand. "You said it now," I said. "That's what matters." He looked at me, eyes red, voice shaking. "You're not a ghost. You've always been the strongest, most present person in my life. I just didn't see it." "You do now?" He nodded. And under that wide open sky, with wind teasing the leaves and tulips swaying gently, my son wept in my arms, not out of grief, but release. And I held him, the way I had the day he was born. the way I always would. That summer, James asked me to dance. We were in the middle of a community center fundraiser. A live band played old swing tunes. Couples twirled. Laughter filled the air. I don't dance, I warned him. He smiled. Then let's sway. So we swayed. His hand on my back, my head on his chest. The music swelled, and time folded in on itself. For one brief, shining moment, I was young again, not in body, but in spirit. Not in years, but in heart. And as the sun dipped low behind the hills, I realized something I hadn't dared believe for a long time. My life wasn't ending. It was beginning again. By the time August rolled around again, the air had changed. It wasn't just the scent of honeysuckle or the sound of cicadas outside my window, it was something inside me. A loosening. Grief had become less sharp, like sea glass worn down by time. The woman I once was stoic, invisible, quiet in her strength had made space for someone new. Someone softer, and maybe even a little bolder. One morning, James showed up with 2 coffees and a picnic basket. No excuses, he said, smiling like a man with a secret. We're going to the lake. The lake? I asked, eyeing his sun hat and open button down like we were in some Nicholas Sparks novel. You need water, and laughter, and chicken salad. So I went. We drove with the windows down, his old truck wheezing on every incline. And when we reached the lake, we sat under a crooked oak tree, our feet bare in the grass. As we ate, I found myself telling James a story I hadn't told anyone in years about the night Thomas proposed, barefoot in our tiny kitchen, with flour on his nose and a ring made out of foil. I laughed so hard I cried. I said, wiping my eyes now. James was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned closer and whispered, would it make you cry or laugh if I told you I'm falling in love with you? My breath caught. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. I think I've been waiting to hear that, I said. And I'm falling too, I whispered. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. We just sat there, the afternoon sun warming our skin, and let love arrive in silence. A few weeks later, Evan brought up the past. Again. We were pruning the roses out front, me knees aching, his shirt damp with sweat when he said, I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd married her. I looked at him, the shears paused in my hand. Do you regret it? I asked. He shook his head slowly. No, but I regret who I was back then. I let so much happen right in front of me. I made you feel like a burden. You didn't make me feel that way, Evan. She did. But I didn't stop it. You were in love. I was weak. You were young. I corrected him. That's different. He snipped a stem and looked out across the yard. You never got the thanks you deserved. I didn't do it for thanks. I know. That's why you deserve them. I smiled. You're a good man, Evan. Maybe you had to lose something to become one. He looked at me, eyes warm with understanding. You're the one who taught me how. In September, the community center held a storytelling panel part of a Senior Voices initiative. They asked me to be a keynote speaker. I stood on stage in front of strangers, my fingers trembling only slightly as I took the microphone. I used to think my story didn't matter, I began. That I was just a side character in other people's lives. A mother, a wife, a helper, an afterthought. I paused, looked at the audience. But something happened that changed that. Something painful, yes, but also clarifying. You see, someone once told my son I was a sad little ghost. And for a while, I believed her. A few gasps, quiet but audible. I thought maybe I was the burden. Maybe I was the embarrassment. But then I remembered something my husband used to say. Ghosts don't haunt, the living, regret does. A beat. And I realized. I didn't want my son to live with regret. I didn't want him to wake up one day, long after I was gone, and wish he'd listened more closely, or stood up sooner, or known me better. The room was silent. Still, I may be old. I may be slower than I once was. But I am not invisible. I am not fragile. I am not finished. Applause broke out, strong and real. And in that moment, I saw my younger self not in the mirror, but in the faces of women in the audience. Heads nodding, eyes glistening. We were still here. Evan proposed to Justine on a cool October afternoon. He didn't make a spectacle of it. No photographers. No flash mob. Just a walk in the park, a handwritten letter, and a ring that once belonged to my grandmother. They came by afterward, giddy and glowing, and asked if I'd help plan the wedding. I wanted to feel like home, Justine said. And you're home. I cried, of course. The The kind of crying that comes from being seen after so long in the shadows. We picked the flowers together, cooked the test meal in my kitchen. She even let me stitch part of her dress hem, something old, she'd whispered. The wedding was small, intimate, held under the same crooked oak tree by the lake where James and I had picnicked. I walked Evan down the aisle. James stood beside me, hand warm in mine. And when they said their vows, I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel fear. I felt peace. Because this time, my son was marrying someone who saw him. And I was no longer a ghost in the corner, I was a witness at the center. In the months that followed, life slowed in the best way. James and I spent our mornings tending the garden, our afternoons sipping coffee on the porch. Sometimes, we danced in the kitchen. Sometimes, we read silently in the same room, our breaths falling into the same rhythm. Evan and Justine called often. They adopted a second dog, named her Mabel. Harold was less than thrilled. And one crisp December morning, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Claire. A short note, handwritten, no return address. Dear Margaret, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that your voice changed me. You showed me what love is supposed to look like even when I couldn't see it. I'm working every day to become someone worthy of a second chance. Not with Evan, but with life. Thank you for seeing through me, even when I was hiding. Claire. I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my journal. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. People can change, but only truth can start the process. I turned 72 this year. James baked me a crooked chocolate cake. Evan and Justine brought balloons and confetti that stuck to the ceiling fan. The dogs knocked over the punch bowl, and I laughed. A real, deep laugh that echoed through the house. Later that night, as I stood alone on the porch, I looked up at the stars and whispered, I'm still here. Not out of bitterness, not out of defiance, but out of gratitude. Because when the world tried to make me smaller, when someone tried to erase me from the most important day of my son's life, I stood up. I spoke. I held the truth. And it gave me everything.